submit it for the record, where it makes public records checks and FBI national crime checks optional for the sponsors and adults living in the home.
Without objection, Mr. Tiffany is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ranking member ripped on the Trump appointees in his opening remarks, which we largely expected. But I just asked the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, do you have a medical degree?
I do not.
You do not have a medical degree. Are you familiar with the Florida grand jury presentment that they did about a year and a half ago in 2023 in regards to unaccompanied alien children?
I'm somewhat familiar with it. I was briefed on it on many occasions.
Are you familiar that in that report, it revealed that children were pimped out by their aunt, which it turns out the aunt wasn't even related to the child, the so-called aunt? Are you familiar with that story that was in there?
There are a number of incidents that are reported in that Florida report. Some of them I can probably recall better than others. Some of them I would challenge and dispute, but that one I don't remember.
And do you remember the teenage girl that was in a house with unknown men with no private bedroom for her? Are you familiar with the sponsors that utilize a strip club in Jacksonville as an address for where this child, where a child should be settled?
Congressman, as I said, I don't have the information on that Florida grand jury report in front of me. I certainly can go back and take a look at it and try to get back to you.
Are you familiar that the case managers are only performing home studies, or the case managers are only doing case studies or home studies in 4.5% of placements in Florida? Only 4.5%. In fact, discretionary home studies were 1%. Is that all you folks are checking up on, these kids that are so vulnerable?
Congressman, thank you for the question. Congress, in passing the laws that apply to the unaccompanied children, said that home studies would be reserved for those children who came to us with circumstances that showed trauma or the need for additional services. So by law, by statute passed by you in Congress, those of you in Congress in the past, we have the obligation to conduct these home studies only in those particular cases. We provide a home study.
So you decided to do the minimum?
No, that's
1%. That's what you
about
said.
to go there.
Okay, here's the law. That's all we're going to do. In the meantime, you got kids being placed in addresses like a strip club in Jacksonville, Florida.
That's what I was trying to say, is that's not the case.
In your testimony.
We do home studies at our discretion. Most of the time, we have to wait till we have the funding. No, we have the funding to do those discretionary home studies, but we've expanded them, and that's why the foundational rule has become so important.
In your testimony, you said you coordinate with the states and local municipalities to make sure that you're working with them. In this Florida presentment, it says neither U.S. Department of Homeland Security or HHS actively coordinates or consults with the state on the UAC that are resettled in Florida. Did you see that part of the study? You aren't coordinating with them? Why are you not coordinating with them?
I find that hard to believe, because remember, we used to have programs in Florida that had licensed care facilities. Florida decided to unlicense these facilities, and so we've been in constant touch with Florida.
So you said you've seen some of the what was presented here. Do you dispute the study from Florida?
I have a number of issues with the Florida report.
If you would share with me, and at an appropriate time, not today, if you want to share with me all the things you dispute in that study, that presentment by Florida, I would really like to see it. Because then I want to take it to Florida and ask them, what were you lying about? Because obviously you're telling me that there's some misrepresentation by Florida here. Is that right?
Well, one thing you could really help us with is checking with Florida to find out why they decided to not allow licensed caregivers be part of our program. All the kids that we place in care, we try to place in licensed care
Do you believe you're in charge of an assembly line, as the chairman alluded to?
If I could just conclude, but the important thing about Florida is Florida took affirmative action to unlicense centers.
I'll wait for your answer in regards to Florida offline here. That'll be just fine. I want to ask you the Harris question. Would you change anything that you've done over the last 4 years in regards to illegal immigration?
recognizing that we don't deal with immigration, that is part of DHS's authority. We deal with the care, the human services side of care for kids.
Would you change anything that you've done in the last 4 years with 320,000 children unaccounted for by your administration?
We work tirelessly to strengthen and improve the program of the UC, the unaccompanied children that come before us. And we work really hard to make sure we, first and foremost, protect the safety and the well-being of those kids. Every day is a challenge, and we do the best we can.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Nadler for 5 minutes.
Mr. Secretary, since Mr. Tiffany kept cutting you off, would you answer the question about Florida that he asked?
Congressman, thank you, because I think this is very important. It's been very difficult to deal with some of the states because we seek out licensed care facilities because that is the best practice to ensure child welfare. And so we don't place these kids with just anybody. They have to be folks who are licensed to care for kids. So when we had our facilities in Florida, they were licensed. Florida took affirmative steps to say that they would not license any caregiver who took care of unaccompanied children. And so today, if a caregiver wants to come forward to provide services to these unaccompanied children we have at ORR, we cannot have them be licensed. So what we have done is we have essentially set the floor of what licensing would require in order to get any caregiver in Florida to be able to care for our kids. But we don't understand why any state would abrogate its responsibility of making sure caregivers are licensed caregivers.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.